Welcome to They Tried to Bury Us. My name is Tamer, Kattan. I'll be your host. I'm a comedian, a writer, and an actor. I was born in Egypt and moved to America when I was just a kid, so I'm very proud of being an immigrant. And ever since I started doing comedy, I've met more and more immigrants, and I have found more and more amazing stories, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I'm going to have a new guest. They're going to sit down and share with us their American origin stories, and we're going to get to know each other better, and we're going to find out that we're all just the same. So tune in each week, tell every single person you know, and thanks for listening. Welcome to episode 4 of They Tried to Bury Us. I'm Tamer Kattan, joined by my co-host,
Kity, Kattan.
Welcome back, Mom.
Thank you.
And I'm really excited this week to bring my friend Valeria on the podcast. You could share your last name, or you don't have to share your last name.
Marcial.
Valeria Marcial.
I actually have 2 last names. So
Let's hear it, kid.
Let's hear it.
Valeria Marcial Velandia.
Ooh, that's
wow,
it's so floral.
So cute.
Yeah.
It's almost like your name is in cursive.
It is. That was the first way I learned how to write in cursive. So
Yeah, people don't write in cursive anymore. It's
all.
crazy.
It's so romancy.
It is. It's romantic or romantic. You're right.
Romantic love.
So I'm really excited to have Valeria on this episode because Val, as you go by sometimes by the people that know you, I found out that you were from Bogota, Colombia, and you moved here, around 2000?
Yeah, we moved here the summer of 2000.
Okay, so before we get into your story, I want to I want you to just describe where you're from, what it was like, what your life was like there, all the way up until what made you want to come to America, or what made your family want to come to America.
So I was born in Bogota. We are surrounded by the Andes. So waking up, as a child, I always remember just the mountains around us. And it's cold because we're so high up. And it's beautiful. I grew up with my family, my mom, bunch of cousins. I went to school outside of the city, so it was like the countryside.
Is there a city in America that it resembles?
It's a big city. It's the capital. So it's kind of like New York, Washington, a lot of buildings, very bad traffic, a lot of people. But then it has that Latin American part of it where there's invasions part of towns where people just took up the mountain and made cities out of card box and aluminum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you're leaving the city, there's just invasions. These places don't have any structures. They're the communities, favelas, but we call them comunas. But the rest of the city is beautiful. I grew up going to a school in the country, so I would drive. I don't know. It was 2 hours every day to get to school.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was a very progressive school. So at the same time, I was doing English, Spanish, and we were doing a lot of arts. So I grew up with the arts my entire life. We had this one class that I loved.
How old were you at this point?
I was in kindergarten, first grade.
Okay.
We moved here when I was in second grade, at the end of second grade. So, but this class was corporal expression. And what we would do would be go into class and act like something. So we would act like an egg for the entire class. Or we'd be lions, or I don't know, we'd be the wall.
That's so creative and artistic.
Yeah.
That's rad.
Art.
Yeah, it was really fun. At the same time, there was a civil war, but my parents protected me from that so much. I wasn't really aware of it. I knew it was happening. One time, we were going on a trip with my grandma.
It's a pretty big civil war.
Yeah. So Colombia.
Colombian conflict, right?
Yeah. So there's little backstory. Drugs, wars, Pablo Escobar. But then during the 50s, there was a guerrilla group called the FARC that came about to protect and give the miners and workers rights. And they started a civil war with the government in 1949, April 9th. They killed the candidacy for president, and that's what started it all.
And America had some influence in that.
Yep, Operation Condor. Shout out to America, always putting dictators in power in Latin America.
Unbelievable.
So that started the Civil War, and by the time I was born in the 90s, it was really big. Other guerrilla groups had started forming. There was the right guerrilla group, the paramilitares, and then 2 others. So they were fighting for territory, fighting for the cartels and the drug routes. So it was bad.
So this is a civil war, and then a government fighting a revolutionary paramilitary that's a far left guerrilla group that's a revolutionary army, and then on top of that, there's a crime syndicate involved as well.
Yes, and then the government, all the senators were part of the opposition to the FARC. The paramilitares, which was the right-wing guerrilla, were created by like our senators, Uribe mostly. He was our ex-president.
Mhm.
And so they protected like the drug cartels, and they protected the paramilitares that were like bombing places, and they were killing everyone. And they had, like, when we moved away, it was at the height of it. They had a quota of how many guerrilla members the army had to turn in. So they started killing 16-year-olds and dressing them up
Oh
in the
my
FARC
God.
uniforms.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, because
So
they
they
were
would
not meeting their
kill
quota
innocent people to meet their
Mhm.
quotas and dress them up as if they were enemies of the
of the
state.
FARC. Yeah, they would dress them up as FARC members because the FARC wore like a military outfit, but you knew they were FARC because they had different combat boots.
Mm.
Oh.
So they would dress them up and turn them in. And I think the like last count I heard, it was like 1,800 people that were killed as like false positives.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The one thing I remember about that war is that they called it an asymmetrical war, meaning like this is the kind of war where there's rockets fighting people with rocks. And in the middle of it, like from what I understand, there were human rights violations by every group. It was, I mean, just imagine in America if it was a civil war and the mafia was involved as well, and the highest death toll was just innocent people that were in the middle of all three of these different factions going to war with each other.
Yeah.
And you're a little girl.
I mean, it was wild. I never understood how dangerous it was until like I grew up and like we moved away and I got perspective.
Mm.
But one time we were leaving the city and we got stopped by the FARC because they used to like just stop you, and like if you had anything interesting, they would take it, kidnap you.
Wow.
And I was in the car with my grandma in the backseat, and my grandma saw a papaya, like a beautiful papaya, and she like asked one of the FARC members. She was like, "Listen, I really want that papaya." She had no idea that they were FARC, like clueless. She thought it was the military. She was like, "Can you please go get that papaya for me? Like I really wanted." And the guy went and like brought down the papaya from the tree and like gave it to her, and he let us go because he was like, "You remind me of my mom. You guys have a
Wow.
safe trip." So it was like that. It was like,
It's so funny.
Very
Every
touching.
immigrant I've met so far, there's always somebody has a story where somebody was nice to them that it wasn't supposed to be, and it was because they reminded them of somebody in their own family. Even your story, Mom, where you told the lady that
Georgette.
she had the same name as your mom. Her name was Georgette.
Uh-huh.
Isn't it funny? Like
Yeah.
people that are supposed to hate each other, they humanize immediately once they realize that we're the same.
Yeah.
So you're a little girl in this amazing little school, acting like an egg, and in the middle of all this insanity, it's become so normal.
yeah, I was telling you earlier that like someone planted a bomb on my grandma's street. There were like bombs daily. People just like would be at lunch and you'd get shot up. So it was a really interesting dynamics between like having to be super like aware of it, but not really because my parents were doing such a great job of keeping me in a bubble, and then not being able to like really leave outside of Bogota because it was so dangerous. So yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. So, and you, at this age, you're still pretty young, so you're not really aware. Was there ever a moment where you felt fear?
Yes. Well, this one's kind of like a funny one that was not necessarily super fearful. We'll get into the fearful one next. I was in my bus because it used to take me forever to get to school, and I had two really high pigtails, and one of them was hanging outside of the window, and someone just went by and pulled my hair really hard as like we were at a
Wow.
stop sign.
Oh my God.
And I remember like crying, being like, how can people do this, like invade my
You're
space?
just a little kid.
Mm-hmm. But then my dad's kind of grandfather, uncle situation got kidnapped one time. And I remember that's when like it clicked that like we lived in a dangerous place. They were like out of the country, like out of the city. They were in the country. And the guerrilla came up and went into the house with like machine guns. Later on, like the bodyguards told me the story that they all had like huge machine guns and bazookas, and like they had baby pistols and like couldn't do anything. And they went in and they kidnapped him, and he was like kidnapped for 6 months.
Wow.
And then the army did an operation and they went and liberated him. I think that was the first time I remember like shit was happening.
Yeah. Oof. So then how old are you when your parents decided we want to move, we want to get out of here?
I was like 8, 9, 99, so I was 8.
Did they make you aware of it? Did they have a sit down conversation with you?
I mean, they did, but I don't remember it. I remember mostly I went to a British school, but we were like on the American schedule because in Colombia, our school schedule is different. Your longer break is December and your shorter one is summer. But I went to a British school, so it was like long summer, short December. And my little brother had finished school in December, and they waited for me to end my school year to move. My dad moved first, and then my mom. And I remember like the last day of school, all my friends saying bye to me and like them signing my T-shirt.
Wow.
And that's when that's the memory I have of moving. I don't remember them telling me. I was little, but I remember like all my friends crying. And like my best friend at the time, she was like my first friend. She came with us when we moved to like help the move be easier. So she spent the summer here with us. And we went to Disney World, and she like was here for a good 2 months, and then she had to go back. She had school. And that's when life in America started.
Okay. So where did your dad had to come first?
Yeah, my dad came to LA the end of 99, early 2000s. He found a job out here, and they were waiting for me to end school. So 6 months went by, and then my mom, my brother, and I moved. But by that time, my dad had already moved twice. He didn't like his job out here, so he found another job in Miami, packed up his car, and drove all the way by himself.
From LA to Miami by himself to prepare for his family.
Yeah, got us a house, got us everything, and then we just arrived.
So do you remember what it felt like when your dad was gone and you guys were in Colombia?
I remember we would talk to him a lot on the phone. He used to travel for work fairly often, so it was like I thought
what did he do?
He was a journalist.
Oh wow. Okay.
So he covered some crazy stuff. So he used to travel because he worked for the international section. So I thought he was just like on a big business trip, but I remember having to like have him on the phone a lot, and my mom was always like very sad because he left right around Christmas time. So I remember that was really hard on my mom.
Sure.
I talked to him on the phone, and I kept on being like, "Oh, when are you coming back?" Like I thought he was on business, and then 6 months later, he moved.
Now, when you guys were thinking about moving to America, when you knew you were on your way, what was your impression of America at the time?
We had been here once before because my grandpa lived here. So we came, I think it was the year before, 2 years before. So America to me was fun and grandpa and vacation and Disneyland. And my grandpa lives in Key West, and he had this pool with a mango tree that went right over it. And my entire summer that summer, I just spent diving into the pool and catching mangoes. So that's what America was to me. And
that's
then we
amazing.
moved here, and everyone was mean to me. And I was put into a class for like non-speaking English people, but I spoke English. They were like, "No, you don't." I'm like, "Yes, I want to."
Why was everyone mean to you?
Because I was new. I was weird. I wore glasses. I always talked about art.
It's always talked about art?
Yeah. My parents were really big believers in like film and art and took us to museums growing up. So I always talked about like art and colors and like wanting to do fun things, and people were just thought I was weird.
It's interesting because a lot of people think, oh, Miami is practically like Latin America. And so here comes this person from Colombia, and you'd think you'd be accepted.
I went to a pretty white school though. My school was actually very racist. We were segregated by language. So the Spanish kids were like one thing. And then there was a class of Latinos and Black kids. And my class was probably like 15, 16 students to a teacher. And we had 2 teachers. And then the other class, the third like Latino Black class, was maybe like 30 students to one teacher. And we were like completely separated. We never saw one another.
Why'd they do that?
I don't know.
They just treated you like second-class citizens.
Mm-hmm. My parents actually like fought to put me into like the bilingual class. So it was crazy. And I never, once again, growing up, this seemed normal, but it was fucked up.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a funny thing too. Like people forget, like you get these, when you're that age, you're still like wet clay. And like the things that affect you when you're that age, especially in America, it stays with you. It stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
In such a young age to have people treating you with prejudice.
Yeah. And I remember my brother cried a lot when we first moved here.
Was he older or younger?
He was younger. He was 3. We had a nanny growing up, Ene. She was the best. So she was with him all day because he was such a small toddler. And I think leaving her was really hard for him. And he would cry for her
Wow.
at night all the time.
I had the same thing. There was Rauhaya.
Yeah.
She was like a family member
Yeah.
in Cairo, and she was one of the people I missed the most.
Yeah.
Like she was like, it was like having a second mom, you know?
Yeah.
So then you guys are here, people are starting to get mean to you and stuff. At what point do you start going, okay, things are getting a little bit better, I'm starting to fit into American culture?
I made a friend. Her name is Camila. Shout out, baby. I love you. She also moved to America at the same time as I did. And we were like in that non-speaking English class.
Where was she from?
She's from Brazil, from Sao Paulo. And she was weird. She was a ballerina. So she was always talking about ballet and like doing ballet moves in the middle of class. And she was my first friend. And it happened to be that we lived a couple blocks away from each other.
Wow.
So we became best friends. And I think that was like the first time I felt like it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
A friend, that's all you needed. One good friend.
One good friend.
Yeah, one good friend gives you hope. So what was your toughest day?
So my grandpa dying. I was in 9th grade. I actually could have my first tattoo because of him. It's a rook. He was a chess player.
Oh, that's nice.
But we were really close together like my entire life. He would read Don Quixote to me, and we had like one chess piece I would move whenever he played. And he died. He was really sick for a while. And at that time, it took us a while to be able to go back to Colombia because papers. We had to be here for 2 years. My dad was American, and at that time, if one of your parents was American, you had to stay in the U.S. for 2 years to be able to get your citizenship. So we couldn't go back. And my grandpa passed away.
So while he was sick, you couldn't visit?
Yeah, we couldn't visit. And then I visited at maybe a year before he passed away. But then 9th grade came around and he passed away and I couldn't go. Tickets were too much. Like I was in the middle of school. It was like a next day situation.
Oh, God.
And I remember sitting in biology class and I was crying in the back and I was like doing poorly in biology that year. So like that added to it. And my mom left. I called her and she was at the airport and I like begged her to go, but it just couldn't happen. So I missed my grandpa's funeral. And that was really hard on me.
That must have been hard because you don't get closure.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy to me to think that there are people in prison who can request time off to go to their loved ones' funerals. But if you're an immigrant in America and you're going through a residency process and you have a sick, dying relative, if you leave the country, you can't
Come back.
You can't come back.
It's crazy.
It's not humane. Like it literally, we have a rule that works for convicts that they don't give that same right to immigrants.
The way we treat immigrants is despicable because we don't I don't know, not being able to say bye to your family and not being able to be there for really big events is, I think, the hardest part of living away from them. I was very close to my mom's family. I still am. But all of them stayed behind and we were the ones that left. So they have this proximity and this they're always together. They're always barbecuing, that when we go back, I love them and they love me. But there's always that sense of an outsiderness to
There's a
it.
disconnection. Yeah.
And I think that's so hard.
They say the same thing to me when I go to Egypt. I remember there was one of the first jokes I ever wrote was a guy telling me go back to where I came from, and I said I did. They hated me because I changed.
Yeah.
I changed. I'd become different. And even when you go back to Egypt, they tell you
You're too American.
What's the word they use in Egypt? When I go back, they say they're like, you're not Egyptian. You're
Khawaga.
Khawaga.
You're
foreigner. You're a foreigner.
It's everything change about you, the way you think, the way your attitude. I mean, completely different because the way they think, it's completely different the way you think. In America, more open mind.
Well, it's a different society. You get exposed to different things. It's funny because I think when people talk about their childhood, sometimes they remember a younger version of themselves. I remember a completely different person. I was a different person back then than I am now. So it's crazy that your identity starts to get questioned a lot. Like, what am I? It's like you're stuck in between these two worlds. For a long time, I struggled with it. Like, am I American or am I Egyptian? And then I finally got to the point where I realized I'm this thing in the middle, and that thing deserves identity too.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly fine being that.
Yeah.
So what do you think made, you said your family came, but you had other family members that stayed. What do you think is the difference between your family and theirs? Like, what was different about your folks that made them want to take the leap and leave?
Well, first of all, my dad was American, but he lived his entire life in Colombia. Like,
oh, wow.
His entire upbringing was Colombian. His great-grandma moved there. She didn't even speak Spanish when they got there. So he grew up also with this like duality of cultures, being white, having Thanksgiving, having Christmas on the 25th as opposed to the 24th. And when things got really, really bad, my parents were like, well, we have this opportunity to make life for our kids better and to like be safe. So they left. And I don't think the rest of my family had that opportunity because they would come here undocumented as opposed to the privilege that we had having my dad have papers.
Yeah. So what about you? So you guys are in America now. This is, when that happened with your grandfather, when your grandfather passed away, how old were you?
I was 15, 14.
Wow, such a tough age to
So,
lose.
yeah, I was going through like an identity crisis of not knowing who I was, Colombian, American, an artist. I went to a very academic school, but I always wanted to do art. So there was also like that duality. And my grandpa was always the person that like nurtured me in a sense. He like let me do whatever I wanted. He was in charge of taking me to school in kindergarten. And he wouldn't take me because he would just take me to the park and play with me instead.
That's awesome.
We had a very close relationship, and then he passed away. And I remember for the first time questioning God, questioning religion, questioning what I was doing in school if I wanted to like be an artist. So that brought on like my entire existential crisis. That was a little bit of high school. And he wasn't there for it, and it sucked.
Yeah, I can imagine. That must have been really hard.
Yeah, he loved to read, and that's part of me. He used to say that Don Quixote, you could open it in whatever chapter, and you didn't have to read the entire book. You just had to read a chapter, and you had a story.
I like that.
I like it. Yeah. Very true.
So you're in America, and then you have this grandfather that makes you feel a very specific way. Do you think the way that he made you feel was different than the way you might have been feeling at the time? Like as a 15-year-old in a new country?
Yeah. By that time, I had been here for like middle school, so I was pretty Americanized by then. But my grandpa, he was amazing. I'm gonna cry right now. He was amazing, and he just like let you believe in what you wanted. Like my brother was always very science oriented and like math, and I was the complete opposite. And with him, he was always talking about science and like making him read science. And with me, he knew that like I liked literature, so he was always nurturing that. And I think my parents nurtured it as well, but I think having like someone outside of your parental units being like, this is cool, you can see this, was more important.
Yeah, it's special. What do you think? Like he's you're going through this time in America. You're figuring it out, and you're going back and forth between Colombian and American, and people start. What do Americans think of Colombians in Miami at the time?
Well, everyone, as soon as you say Colombia, the first thing that comes into mind is Pablo Escobar and cocaine and the drug cartels. And living in Miami, that was very like true to it because they had all their drug routes through Miami. And a lot of like the violence of the 70s and the 80s came from those cartels running Miami. But what people don't realize is that Colombia is so much more than that. We're the Andes. One of my favorite songs is by Calle 13, and it's called Latin America. And Presidente talks about how we're the most resilient people, how we have been colonized, and how our governments are basically still kings and queens, but we're the most resilient people, and we have legs, and we will always continue walking. And I think that was like what it felt like, trying to show people that Colombia was more than just cocaine and parties and like girls with plastic surgery. Every time I say I'm a Colombian, someone like, if they know Colombians, they're like, oh, okay, they expect like a very pretty girl with fake boobs and like a big butt, dressed in like very.
You're very beautiful.
Thank you,
Yes.
but like the image people have of Colombian girls is completely different from what we
Sure.
mostly are. They have the image of like the drug culture of Colombian girls. And I think there's so much more to it than that.
Absolutely. That's the thing that drives me most crazy is the almost cartooning of cultures outside of America, right? Like I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been. You leave this country where there's a civil war going on and a crime syndicate that's killing innocent people. You come to this other country to live a better life, and then the only lens they know you through is that same cartel that made you leave. Like it's the worst of like of all the things. Like it's the one thing that's like the worst of Colombia, and they talk about it like it's the coolest thing.
Always. And it's idealized, and I hate when people idealize like the drug cartels. It was bad. Like so many people died. Like I remember kids in my school, their parents got killed, their grandparents got killed. There was this one girl whose grandfather got like straight up shot in his house.
And you guys would hear about it.
Yeah, we would hear about it. I remember kindergarten. One of my classmates, his little brother got kidnapped from the hospital. Day old, they took him. Fortunately, they found him 3 years later.
What?
Yeah, my dad at the time was a journalist, so we had like this entire campaign where he would like go to the school and like we'd do class things, being like return him, but they just took him from the hospital.
There's nowhere to feel safe. Like you can't even have a baby, and your baby gets kidnapped at 1 day old and is missing for 3 years.
Yeah.
You can't even go to a hospital and feel safe.
Take him from the hospital, not from the street.
So, yeah, but I mean, there's nowhere to feel safe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like even in hospitals here, you think that's the one place where I go, okay, I'm safe here. I can exhale. The people that are here are supposed to be doing good, and then there's people that are stealing babies and stuff. It makes you so uncomfortable and so. Like, can I ask you a weird question?
Yeah.
Do you watch Narcos?
So I'm currently watching the Mexican one, and I've been having this like really big dilemma about it because the original one, I felt like it was so idealized and like the DEA was the good guy. And I knew so much about it from living through it and like just hearing my parents talk about it and my entire family talk about it. I couldn't get through like the first season of it.
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, your accents are wrong.
Yeah, I noticed that, by the way. Yeah, his
Yeah.
accent was from a different country in South America.
The actor they got was from Brazil.
Yeah.
And Pablo Escobar is very known for his extremely heavy accent from Medellin.
Unbelievable.
So,
Yeah.
so I like right now I'm having that dilemma. I'm like, I know this is probably completely inaccurate to like what the Mexican version of their struggle is. So I couldn't get through it. I did watch the Colombian version of it. It's called El Patrón del Mal. But they've just like saturated
Does that mean
that topic.
the leader of men? El patrón de men?
Del Mal. Mal is
Oh, of the bad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a cool name. I like this. I like the Spanish title better.
Yeah, so I did watch that with my parents, but I couldn't get through the American one. I felt like the DEA was idealized, and I think the biggest part of the problem, war on drugs, is never going to let us actually save ourselves from drugs.
That's so frustrating to me. I can so relate to this because it's like, here we are in this country with the greatest passport in the world, arguably, but it's the most underutilized. So now you've got this country where they have this cartoon definition of what you are. And then the one lens that's like hey, motorcycle rider, the one lens that Americans tend to learn about other cultures from is TV or film or movies. And then when those shows come out, even those are a completely inaccurate glorification. America is good. Colombia is bad. And it's really not even close to that. It was a bunch of bad people. It was the people in power, including America, that was a real reason, one of the real reasons why that war even took place.
Pablo Escobar became a senator. He was a senator for 2 years. So no matter what anyone was doing, he controlled the government. And at the same time, like, one of my favorite stories about him was that the people in Medellin love him. They like, till this day, you say his name around like the really poor parts of town, and they legitimately love him.
Aren't there some neighborhoods like called?
Yeah.
Named his name?
Well, not his name, but like he built a bunch of neighborhoods and he built houses and just like gave them to the people that lived in these invasion towns and these like on the side of the mountain without running water. He built houses and he just gave it to them. But at the same time, he had a double sewage system, one for like water and one to hide drugs in.
Oh.
So there was like this duality like we all have where he was really bad, but he was also really helpful to the people of his town. And like the government wasn't giving him anything. This war had already been happening for like 20 years and there was still nothing going on. Either you were killed by the FARC, you joined the FARC because they were going to kill you, or you went to the drug cartels. There was like no other way. And he actually gave a lot of people jobs and a lot of people like a community and an economy that they didn't have.
Yeah.
But he is completely evilized and like a horrible person. And I think that like cartoon version of him being so bad also puts like a bad lens on Colombia because it makes us seem like we just produce like bad people and bad things when the reality of it, he was just human like everyone else. And yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like every time I watch that show, I keep it's funny because even some of the prison shows that I watch on TV, at first I was like, oh, I like watching these prison shows to learn about what it's like behind bars. And then I realized that like how much of this is propaganda? Like how much of it is actually produced but with government approval, with government editing, and how much of it is like completely biased. So let me ask you this. You guys couldn't have felt safe in Colombia ever, really, because there's really no one. Was there anyone you guys felt you could trust?
I mean, I'm sure there was. There was like my family. I was so sheltered from all this violence.
Sure.
Like my parents tell me stories now, but they did a fantastic job of protecting me.
Yeah.
I had great friends. I had great time. We like would travel. But for them, it must have been crazy having 2 little kids and not knowing that if you're going to send them to school, where are they going to come back? That's the reality of it. And that's still the reality of it. Like things have gotten better, but they're not the best. And we just elected Donald Trump of Colombia, which I'm so mad about.
Oh, wow.
So he is against the peace treaty. We recently signed a peace treaty between the FARC and they demobilized, but he's completely against it. His propaganda is all like, you guys are going to become Venezuela if you let this happen. Do you want us to be Venezuela? And so he's trying to like go back on a peace treaty that took 50 years. Like we were in a war for 50 years and he doesn't want to follow through with it.
He's a stupid, that's one.
Yes.
Really. He don't have any idea.
It's
about
crazy the
one.
greed and the hunger for power, and that people are willing to sacrifice peace and human lives just so they can get in power.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because people talk about, oh, Donald Trump doesn't drink and Donald Trump doesn't do drugs. I'm like, why does he act like the drunkest man I've ever seen in politics? It's because he's drunk on power.
Yeah.
That's what happens to a lot of these guys that get in power, and especially when they start having too much of it. It's like watching somebody overdose on something. They start acting in insane ways. So what was your best day?
My best friend, the first friend I made here, she moved to Munich when we were in 8th grade, like summer going into 8th grade. And I think that was also a really hard day for me. She was my sister. She is my sister. And her parents told us.
You didn't have a sister. You just had a brother.
No, I have a brother. And so she's my sister. I remember it was like night. I was sleeping over her house. And I was there when her parents told everyone that they were like moving to Munich because her dad got a job. So I felt like my rock because she was like who I hung out with every day, like who I told everything to. She left. And so high school was weird without her. I made friends. I love my friends now. They're still my friends. But her and I just have this like, we're sisters. And so for my 18th birthday, she was flying into Miami to surprise me.
Wow.
But my mom ruined the surprise. I called her. I was at my friend's house and I called her to be like, hey, Mom, we're going to go here or like something. And I asked her what she was doing. And she's like, oh, I'm on my way to the airport to pick up Camila. And I was like, what? And so that was amazing. She showed up at my friend's house and then we had like a little party that I wasn't planning. And we went to this international school. So we had exams, IB exams coming up. And I was like very stressed about that. But having her there for like, I don't know, she was there maybe for like a weekend or so. It was amazing.
Amazing,
Oh, that's
yeah.
cool.
Great surprise.
Except my mommy ruined it.
Well, your mom's the one who probably planned it too, though, no?
she, for sure.
That's funny. Mom, you've ruined stuff for me. You've ruined surprises for me too. I think they get really excited. Right? Foreign moms especially get really excited and
Yeah.
they can't keep secrets.
And
Yeah.
she did such a good job. She was on her way to the airport. She was almost there and then blurted it out.
Okay, let me ask you this: if modern day America, with the percentage of America that's in the Val mix now, what would Val say to Valeria? What would Val today say to Valeria that was first coming to America? What would you tell her about how to prepare for what she was about to experience?
To stop doubting that you had to be one culture.
I like that.
To just accept that, like, cultures are everything and you have learned who you are, not only from your culture, but from the world. To really understand that if you close yourself into, like, one stereotype, you're never going to grow. She had a hard time with that. She
Yeah.
wanted to be white. She wanted to be American. She wanted to be like her dad. So
I struggled with the exact same thing. Just these notions of identity, you know, like I didn't know. I thought I had to pick one.
yeah.
And in America, that, you know, everybody always knows, like, if you get an American citizenship, you have to denounce the other citizenship. And it's like, but wait, I'm erasing identity.
You can't. You can't.
Yeah,
Sure.
and you can't.
Yeah.
Did you guys have to renounce your Egyptian citizenship?
I can't have an Egyptian
No?
citizenship.
No. Yes, you can.
I have
Oh,
my
I
Colombian
can.
one.
I can.
can.
I can get an
Yeah.
Egyptian
Yeah.
passport still.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
You know what?
Unless they change something now, but
I don't know if I can.
You can keep the two
I
citizens.
have my Colombian
Egyptian.
Oh, you
citizenship.
do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Egyptian too. You can.
Oh, I
keep
can.
The two
Okay, I
citizens.
didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really funny thing happen to me the other night that it was so interesting. This guy who's a friend of mine started dating a female police officer, and he was struggling with the idea of dating a police officer. And he called me and he's like, dude, I don't know what to do. You know what we think about police officers. Well, and when we were kids, we didn't like police officers. We had some bad experiences. As an adult, I have friends that are police officers, and I performed for the troops in Afghanistan a couple times, and I performed at military bases, and there's a lot of guys that I've met through those tours that have become cops, and I'm friends with them now. Joe is like
Yeah, he's
part of
a
the
great
family,
man,
and he's
yeah.
a great guy. He's on the SWAT team. He's a great person, and I have a great relationship with cops
He's
as an
adopted
adult.
son for me.
There you go. But so one of my friends is now dating a female police officer, and he's calling me and going, dude, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Do you know how hard it is to find love? Who cares if she's a police officer? Don't be an idiot. We're not little kids anymore. The cops that gave us a hard time when we were kids, those are different people. And it's not, it's not her. Be cool. If she's a good person, then just be with her. And he goes, you're right. I'm being stupid. They start dating. Everything's going great. And the whole time I'm thinking, it's going to be him that messes the relationship up. 3 months go by. It's the happiest I've ever seen him. Things are going great. And, but I don't think she liked him as much as he liked her. And then she was very much into spirituality. She was like a yoga person and a police officer, but she was also really into spirituality and yoga and tarot cards and things like that. So I see him at a party a couple nights ago, and he's like, he looks really down. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, we broke up. And I'm like, why? What happened? I thought everything was going great. And he's like, it's the dumbest reason in the world. You won't believe it.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, what is it? He's like, she's really into astrology. And because she's a cop, she said that she's noticed that most people that are Leos are prone to violent behavior. And because I'm a Leo, it made her extra sensitive to my behavior. And even though, we grew up in the neighborhood we grew up in, I'm a little bit more aggressive than a normal guy, but I'm not a bad guy. I've never hurt anybody. I've never put hands on a woman or anything like that. But just because I'm a Leo, she just decided that I'm not a good person.
Wow.
And then he's like, isn't that insane? And I'm like, I don't know if insane is the word I'd use, because she judged you on when you were born, and I'm constantly judged on where I was born. And who's to say that one unit of measure is better than the other?
Yeah.
Like whenever someone's saying like, where are you from? They're trying to figure out, are you safe? And that's what she was doing with when were you born? Are you safe? That's what people do all the time when they try to categorize us and put us in boxes. And that's another reason why it's important to not pick a stereotype, to let people know that you can't put people in boxes. Like the human experience is too big for us to go, yeah, I'm going to be this cartoon definition of what you decided a Colombian woman is, or what you decided a Colombian is, or I'm going to be an Arab version of this horrific caricature. So I love that we have real people coming on the podcast talking about what it's like that, having a real immigrant experience. Is there anything that you would say to American friends who are starting to open up to the idea of being friendlier to immigrants?
Just accept people for who they are. Like, it's cool to ask questions, but one time someone asked me if we lived in huts.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, we live in a city with buildings and roads and highways. And so just familiarize yourself and accept it and ask questions, but don't be ignorant.
Yeah.
The rest
especially
of the world,
now. There's Google now.
Google.
And the rest of the world is just as advanced as America is.
Yeah. It's my issue with us saying we're number one all the time is it reminds me too much of a bad boyfriend that says you'll never meet anyone better than me. It's not because he's great that he's saying that. It's because he's insecure.
So insecure about it.
And I feel like we act like an insecure country. We should be able to learn from other countries and not like if somebody says, hey, here's this really cool thing that Norway does. We should be able to be like, oh, let's listen to it. But instead we immediately attack it and go, that's socialism. It's like, no, they're humans. We're humans. Let's figure out if that's a cool thing for us to adopt.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like reading. I love reading because it exposes you to like so many different cultures and so many different experiences you would have never been exposed to.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's safer than meeting people. But just treat it like a book. Just enjoy.
That's true. It is safer to meet books than people. You're right, Val.
But just enjoy them. I don't know. I love people. People are amazing everywhere.
You know what? I genuinely feel bad for racists sometimes. I really do. When I've sat down with a group of friends and they're from different countries and different places and we get to have cool experiences. And like, I remember sitting around a table at a hostel in London one time when I was really young and we all were making our country's version of the sound a cow makes. And I didn't know that cows sounded different. Like, did you know in France, a cow goes, meh. It makes sense. So it sounds very French, but there was meh, there was a meh.
How would a cow sound in Egypt?
Probably It's crazy. Well, Val, thank you so much for being on. You've been a delight. And thanks for helping me learn more about Colombia and for being my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Do you have anything? You're an actor. I'm really excited for you. You're in this really amazing acting class.
Yeah. So Shia LaBeouf, everyone, I'm going to do a little plug. He's doing an experimental theater class called Sloss and Rec. If you're
What's
interested,
it called again?
Sloss and Rec.
Sloss and Rec, like Slauson?
Yes, like the street. Okay. If you're interested, you should check it out. It's pretty cool. It's a really safe space, and it's a fun time.
With Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Man, that's so cool.
It's fun.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening in, you guys. See us next week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hey, so guys, from time to time, I hear stories from my mom from time to time, and I thought it would be fun to create little bonus tracks of Kity stories. And there's one story that you told me recently, Mom, that I want you to share. It was about, why don't you just go ahead, jump into the story.
Yeah, okay. It's just to show you sometimes immigrants, they have different kind English. So I have a friend, she's very dear friend. She come from Michigan, Amy, visit. And she used to work with me, and they have a late night party for her. I cannot go, so I said.
Oh wait, can I say something? Yeah. So she used to work with you in California,
and she moved
and
to
then she
Michigan,
moved to Michigan
to raise family. So now she went to just a new bride, and now she has 4 beautiful boys.
That's so. How long was she in Michigan?
She left maybe 10 years ago.
Okay, so she used to work with you in California. She moved to Michigan for 10 years.
And she came back for her birthday 40. Her husband surprised her to be her birthday 40 here. And everybody from work want to go for party night for her. And I said, I can't drive at night. How about you come tomorrow, dinner in my house? So I invite few people with her, and she came second day in my house. And I asked her for the night before about the party, what's going on, and she kept telling me how she enjoys the night in my boss' house. He has a new house by the beach, close to the beach.
With a
peaceful.
big balcony, right?
Big balcony, yeah. So she told me everything, and I went second day. Just imagine what I say now. I went to the office, and it has,
Wait, can I say one thing?
Yes.
She told you how much she enjoyed the balcony. What a great balcony it
Great
was.
balcony,
that she, after being in
peaceful.
Michigan for all these years, that when she came back, she just stayed on that balcony all day. She enjoyed
Miss California.
Miss California.
Peaceful, nice, everything great.
But when you're an immigrant, there's more than one word for balcony.
Of course.
So now you're back at work. Go ahead.
So I went the second day at work, and my boss, the one she visited him, he was there. I'm not gonna say his name. And can you imagine the room? 4 women, and 2 men, and my boss and me. And I went front to everybody. I say, hey.
To the guy that has the house.
Yeah. I mentioned his name. No, I'm not going to say his name. And I said, Amy, yesterday she was in my house and she really, really enjoyed your dick. And everybody look at me like I'm crazy, their eyes wide open. And I felt, I said something wrong. I said, okay, I got it. I meant the balcony, the patio. I don't know how to say dick from duck or whatever.
It is very close.
Very
Duck and dick are very close.
Yeah, I don't know. So, and in a way, I said, I'm sorry to say that. But anyway, it's I improve your image, So everybody said, oh my God. But I don't know the difference.
Oh, that's awesome.
But when they react like that, I figure that's a bad word.
Yeah,
I know
figured it
what's
out.
dick mean.
Yeah.
But between the balcony patio or
Jack.
I don't know. So sorry for everyone. And Amy, she don't know this story, but sorry.